Consumer Credit Scheme. National Security Advisor, Service Chiefs, Northern Governors meet over kidnapping. And Ningi's constituents give Ahmad a 2-week ultimatum to reverse suspension of Bàndits Senator. Details now. The world news begins with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu reportedly set to withdraw the nomination of Ruby Onwudiwe as a board member of the Central Bank of Nigeria. VOP News gathered that the decision to step down her nomination follows pressure mounted on President Tinubu by top chieftains of the All Progressives Congress regarding Onwudiwe's political affiliation. According to a report by Western Post, Onwudiwe's support for the 2023 presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, was the basis for the party members to protest to senior government officials on the abnormality of the nomination of an opposition figure to serve at the Apex Bank. Recall that on March 14, President Tinubu asked the Senate to confirm the appointment of Onwudiwe as a member of the board of directors of the CBN. President Tinubu's request was contained in a letter addressed to Senate President Godswill Akpabio and read at plenary on Wednesday, March 13. The president said Onwudiwe is a replacement for Uram Kalu Eke, who declined the nomination because he is still a consultant at the World Bank, citing conflict of interest as the reason for his decision. Onwudiwe's nomination came 1 month after Tinubu asked the Senate to confirm 4 people as directors of the board of the Central Bank of Nigeria. In another development, the federal government has disclosed that a total of 160 billion naira has been budgeted for the Consumer Credit Scheme and implementation of the Student Loan Scheme in the 2024 budget. The Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, made the disclosure on Thursday at a press briefing in Abuja. He said 100 billion naira was allocated to a consumer credit scheme to revive the manufacturing sector, to provide goods and services to Nigerians and support the capacity of consumers, describing the scheme as a catalytic fund that is expected to grow. Bagudu also announced that 50 billion naira and 10 billion naira have been budgeted in the signed budget and supplementary budget respectively for the student loan scheme. The minister also disclosed that the government was still consulting with relevant stakeholders on the modalities for the implementation of the loan scheme. He said the disbursement was yet to be done due to the nation's sluggish procurement system that takes a minimum of 3 months to complete before implementation of the budget item. Bagudu also believed that the economy would gain traction if many people could pay for goods and services over some time. Now, the National Security Advisor, amidst the security challenges overwhelming the country, convened a meeting with Northern Governors Forum and service chiefs, including the Inspector General of Police and the Commandant of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. VOP News gathered that the meeting was held behind closed doors on Thursday in Abuja. The chairman of the forum and governor of Gumi State, Inuwa Yahaya, spoke on the outcome of the meeting, which lasted for over 4 hours. Governor Yahaya revealed plans by the forum to consider alternative options to arrest the increasing insecurity in the north. The governor added that the military will be supported in their non-kinetic approach to curtail insurgency. Last week, Bàndits abducted about 300 students from a school in Kuriga town, a town in the Chikun local government area of Kaduna State. At a separate news conference, the military vowed to rescue all abducted victims. On the abduction of internally displaced persons in Gamboro Ngala in Borno State, the military explained that they went beyond permissible distance from the camp. Also, the Director, Defense Media Operations, Major General Edward Buba, said the delay in reporting such incidents is hampering quick response from security agencies and other responders. In another development, constituents of the Bauchi Central Senatorial District in the state have condemned the state, or rather the Senate's decision to suspend their Senator Abdul Ningi. Ningi, a former majority leader in the upper chamber, was suspended for 3 months, expressing sincere concerns about irregularities in the 2024 national budget. The constituents, under the umbrella of the Youth Coalition of Bauchi Central Senatorial District, said the Senate should instead investigate the irregularities with a view to addressing them in the best interest of the country. The coalition, at a press conference held by its chairman, also disclosed to newsmen that they are demanding the Senate immediately reverse its decision of suspending the senator, recalling him back to his seat so he continues to represent his constituency. Also, the highest level of injustice, according to the group, was meted out on the senator and the senatorial district in the history of the country, actually demanding that the Senate should fully investigate all the alleged irregularities in the 2025 budget so that nobody will take Nigerians for granted, and so that the image of the Senate will not be painted black in the eyes of Nigerians. You're currently listening to the World News at 12 on Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. We'll take a short break. When we come back, more news. Welcome back. This is still the World News at 12 and Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. Now, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Atiku Bagudu, has declared that members of the National Assembly did not break any law with new insertions in the 2024 budget. Now, Bagudu was speaking during a press briefing on Thursday in Abuja, and he disclosed that since 1999, it has become a norm in the passing of appropriation for the National Assembly to insert new line items to provide some dedicated projects to their constituencies, which often leads to the rise in approved budget from what was presented by the President. Senator Abdul Ningi, representing Bauchi Central, had raised the alarm over budget padding but was suspended, 3 months by the Senate. However, reacting to the reports, Bagudu said the new insertions did not violate any law because what the President presented to the National Assembly was a bill, but the budget passed with modifications was an act by the Assembly. He said the Senate President submitted a budget to the tune of 27.5 trillion naira, and the National Assembly, in its wisdom, increased it to 28.7 trillion naira. According to Atiku, he disclosed, and quote, "When we presented the budget, it was at an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, but the Assembly increased it to 800 naira to a dollar. That created more revenue. The Assembly also appropriated that the government-owned enterprises contribute more revenue. Then there was an increase in the budget of the judiciary, legislature, and executive." End quote. Now, to speak on some of the issues, as I read out in the World News at 12, actually have joining me via the telephone a legal practitioner, a political, social and national affairs commentator, and economic strategist as well. And that's Barrister Fred Nzako. Barrister Fred Nzako, good afternoon and welcome to the World News at 12.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to our listeners.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me loud with every clarity?
I can hear you very well.
Thank you so much. Barrister Fred Nzako, I think I watched you on one of the television stations when you were giving a breakdown of the situation with Senator Ningi. Now, Atiku Bagudu, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, is saying that there is nothing untoward, all right, in the Senate inserting whatever insertions they need to insert in the 2024 budget. According to him, from time immemorial or even since 1999, it is a norm for the budget to be inflated, meaning more insertions to be included. And in defense, he said the president presented a bill of 27.5 trillion naira and the National Assembly, in its wisdom, increased it to 28.7 trillion naira. So if, according to him, the National Assembly in its wisdom increased it to 28.7 trillion naira, what was there for them to have explained when Ningi raised it up? Why the ruckus? And why did they suspend Ningi when they knew that Ningi wasn't lying in what he said? All they needed to do was to clarify. So why the theatrics and the drama and now coming to say there was nothing wrong in the Senate inserting in the 2024 budget?
The making of the national budget is more or less a joint responsibility between the executive and the legislature. The executive will prepare the raw budget when it is still an estimate, and it will be presented before the legislature, in this case by Mr. President, before the joint assembly before the joint houses of National Assembly.
Okay.
And they will now go into looking at the issues and the details one after the other, which we call legislative action on the budget estimates. By the time they are doing that, they now have the opportunity and the latitude and the constitutional authority to adjust some line headings and then adjust some issues they feel needed to be adjusted in the budget. And that is why, because of doing that, they interact with the ministry, departments, and agencies of the government, essentially on the executive arm of government, such that most of the things they have put down in the budget estimate will be defended, and the way it will be implemented will be explained to the National Assembly, sitting in joint session. And when that is being done, if there are issues that they feel that for budget headings or that they feel needed to be adjusted, it is at that point that they are adjusted. Some are increased, some are reduced. And in this particular instance, Mr. President laid before the National Assembly a budget estimate of 27.5 trillion naira, and with the rate of dollar at 750 naira per dollar exchange rate. And National Assembly, in their own wisdom, looking at that exchange rate, they now adjusted it to $800 naira per dollar. That of course increases the quantum of amount in naira, and that has led to that increment, and also adjusted some budget headings.
Barrister Fred Nzako, I understand you explaining everything in proper context. The question I'm trying to have a handle on, or rather a response I need better comprehension from, is this. If this is what they do and it's a norm, why the whole hullabaloo? Why the uproar in the House? Why was Bamidele saying Ningi's plan was a civilian coup against Akpabio? Why the unnecessary theatrics around it?
The uproar in the House was as a result of the fact that even while the Senate Committee Chairman on Appropriation had explained the basic issues regarding some of the issues that came on the first line charge. Recall that Senator Ningi said that they approved a budget of 25 trillion and that Mr. President was implementing a budget of 28 trillion, in which case that 25 trillion had money, location, and project. but over 3 trillion had only money, which is the budget,
and
there
location.
was no location and there was no project, in which case, essentially, that 10 trillion amounted to padding, in which case, there are no projects specifically targeting the 3 trillion naira. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Appropriation explained that there are about 9 issues, 9 headings, budget headings that are not detailed, which you call those that draw from the first line chart, or the one you call statutory transfer.
Okay.
That they were captured in the budget, but the details were not there because they don't have authority over them, which included judiciary, INEC, state fund.
Hello, Barrister Fred.
And a couple of them. Okay. So 9 items amounted to exactly the same amount that Ningi was saying he could not see. So it was expected that, having gotten that explanation, that Ningi would take.
Hello, Barrister Fred Nzako.
The second reason why there was an Oprah was that Ningi went to the marketplace to discuss the issue of budget, which ordinarily has become an appropriation act that can only be discussed on the floor of the assembly.
All right, thank you so much, Barrister Fred Nzako, for that. Well, some groups are asking Akpabio to, as soon as possible, return Ningi to his seat, that his suspension was not necessary. All Ningi, according to them, all Ningi said was there are some anomalies in the 2024 budget that was not initially there, and that Nigerians or the senators demand an explanation as to where the 3 trillion naira came from and or what projects, allocations will that money be spent on. That was basically what Ningi was asking for. So the group is giving Akpabio an ultimatum to return Senator Ningi before 2 weeks. Now that's a threat. What do you think would happen if Senator Ningi is not brought in as soon as possible? And do you think 3 months suspension is too harsh on Senator Ningi for the expose or for what he said?
Anybody who blames the Senate for suspending Ningi should be directed to go and read, or go and read the. If he doesn't speak Hausa language, let him go and read the transcribed version of that interview, the one that was translated to English. Senator Abiola read it on the floor of the Senate, and before the senators took their decision. And if it's even on YouTube, one could Google it and pick it from YouTube and listen. If you listen to what Ningi says to BBC Auto Service, you will even want Ningi to be suspended for more than 3 months. And that is why I strongly believe that even the 3 months given to Ningi was a pat on the back. And if eventually anybody is saying that Ningi must be returned, the person should go and listen to what Ningi told BBC Auto Service. It was more or less an incitement and a raising of negative emotions against the Senate, against the unity of Nigeria, and against the institution of National Assembly. And for somebody as high-ranking a senator as Senator Ningi, it was targeted as causing bad blood in Nigeria. And I can tell you that, and that is why it was seen as a civilian coup d'etat from a one-man gang called Ningi. And that was why even his fellow senators from the Muslim Senators Forum all distanced themselves from him. And of course, he could not even explain what he meant by the accusation. The accusation fell flat in the face of reality and in the face of fact. The facts were laid bare. So outside politics and outside unnecessary conduct and propaganda, if you listen to that interview given by Ningi, or the transcribed version, I can tell you that you will understand why the Senate took the action that they took. And I stand very strongly with the Senate, because Ningi was given the opportunity to bring his accusation or to clear his assertion, but he failed to do so for the whole 3 hours that the sitting lasted in the Senate. And of course, what else do you expect the senators to do? They have to follow their rules and give him light suspension for just 3 months.
Barrister Fred, let's move on to another angle in the political arena. This is from the presidential candidate for the People's Democratic Party in 2023, and that is Atiku Abubakar. He has condemned what he called a disgraceful track record of opacity in handling corruption cases. Now, Atiku is voicing his concerns following recent allegations of budget padding amounting to 3 trillion naira by Senator Ningi. And according to Atiku, he pointed on unresolved scandals such as the $3.3 billion NNPC loan repayment controversy, which has ballooned to a staggering $12 billion repayment burden for Nigeria. He's also stating further that this administration is being selective in the corruption cases that it tries to handle, and aspects of transparency cannot be seen by Nigerians as questions has been asked in that regards. According to Atiku as well, he says these criticisms are coming amidst a backdrop of heightened scrutiny over the alleged budget padding scandal. Alright, now Bayo Onanuga, who is a spokesperson for President Tinubu, is refuting Ningi's allegations. However, concerns are still persisting as to the corruption scandals that continues to surface under President Tinubu's leadership. What's your take on what Atiku Abubakar actually stated concerning the whole situation with Senator Ningi and, of course, the NNPC money that has accrued to $12 billion?
It is the right of Atiku Abubakar to criticize the government, but we expect that such criticism, being a statesman and a former vice president of the country who knows and understands the working of the government at the federal level, where he was VP for 8 years, we expect that such criticism should be constructive and be based on facts, figures, and reality. If he says that there are issues of corruption in the government, I cannot defend that. But if he wants to tie it with this issue of allegation of budget padding, I can tell you that his understanding of the issue of this particular one allegation coming from Ningi is not correct, because I do not see any fact or truth or reality in Ningi's allegation. I do not see. One needs to really go back in time, look at the budget. Meanwhile, Ningi himself was a member of the appropriation committee that critically looked at the budget before it was passed. And before it was passed and forwarded to Mr. President for his action. As of today, it has not become an appropriation law. It is no longer a budget estimate. And in the course of making that budget, it was made in the public, with MBAs invited, and even the civil society organizations being allowed to come and make their own contribution. So if anybody now comes out today to say there was bad padding, one has to explain where the padding was coming from.
So Fred, you're saying now that if Ningi was part of the appropriation and he's coming out to say this, it means there was an ulterior motive for what he did?
Absolutely. That is why many people feel that Ningi has not explained to Nigerians what he had in mind. Some political watchers feel that Ningi wants to shine with this, so that he will be presented to Bauchi people as a fighter for the interests of the North, when he was saying and insinuating that the major capital outlay of the budget was skewed against the North. So Ningi wanted to present himself as a fighter for the northern interest, so that come 2027, when he possibly or probably will want to run for governorship election in Bauchi State, he will use that as a catching phrase that the people will now trust him as a fighter for the North. And that is why his governor quickly said he stood by him, even when the governor has accepted in the same speech that he needs to investigate and know whether what Ningi was saying was right. You cannot stand behind Ningi when you have not conducted investigation as to the correctness or the rightness or wrongness of his assertion. And I can tell you that even with Ningi claiming that he paid 30 million to experts, to consultants to x-ray the budget, he was unable to bring out the result of such exercise. Simply meaning that Apple Ningi wanted to just use the Senate to shine and come back can cause bad blood in Nigeria. And of course, this is not the time for such insinuation.
All right, thank you so much, Barrister Fred Nzako. Finally, before I let you go, there are reports that the president may withdraw the nomination of Ruby Onwudiwe as a board member of the Central Bank of Nigeria, because when her name was brought up, apparently they saw a tweet where Ruby Onwudiwe tweeted via her X account where she said it was a landslide victory for Labour Party at my polling unit, Lekki polling unit. And of course, they said this particular tweet incited some APC supporters who are protesting the nomination by President Tinubu after meeting with the Senate leadership on Tuesday at the State House in Abuja. So if it has to do with capacity, the capacity of this woman, as an individual to be part of the board members of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and just because her political leaning or affiliation is not, in similarity or in tandem with the current administration, there is a strong possibility that she may not be nominated because she supported an opposition political party presidential candidate. Barrister Fred.
Yes, I'm with you. The era of we must understand in this country that there's clear line of distinction between the electoral period, which is marked by politicking, and the period of delivery of good governance. The period of election is over. Now we are looking at delivery of good governance to Nigeria. And here are of the opinion, Nigerians are of the opinion that anybody who has the capacity to deliver on the promises of Mr. President and on good governance to the people should be brought on board, irrespective of the person's political affiliation. Because Nigeria is in dire strife. Nigeria is in a quagmire, and Nigeria needs to be taken out of the tailspit of confusion in which the government and the people of Nigeria have found themselves today. So it is in bad taste, in terrible bad taste, that somebody who ordinarily has the capacity to bring in his or her knowledge, wealth of knowledge and experience to help Nigeria maneuver out of the current economic quagmire, and then the person will be dropped simply because he expressed a different political opinion. I think it is a very bad taste and it is condemnable. And those who are pressurizing Mr. President to only appoint people who think of APC alone do not love Nigeria. Yes, Onwike, up to today, is a professed member of PDP, and he is serving at such high office as the office of the minister.
But we know that Onwike is highly in support of this current administration, and even during the elections, he's leaning all towards the APC. So, in that regard, we don't operate a one-party state. So, and when you operate a multi-party democracy, you should expect that people should have their various nuances, their various leanings during the time of the election. And this is why when we talk about movement of national unity as being the one to get Nigeria out of the current confusion, what it means is that you look at people with capacity and not the opinion they express at time of election. So those who are kicking that Mr. President has appointed people with a different political persuasion do not do so for the love of Nigeria. Anybody who loves Nigeria should be talking about capacity and willingness to deliver good governance to the people. That is what is important today. After all, the difference between one party and another in Nigeria is a very thin line, just by name. In practice and in action, we do not see any difference at all. Barrister Fred Nzako, I sincerely do appreciate you sharing your views on some of the issues raised on the World News at 12. Thank you so much.
Many thanks.
All right, to wrap up the World News at 12 here again are the top stories. I heard that President Tinubu to withdraw Onwudiwe's nomination as CBN board member. Federal government budgets 160 billion naira for student loan consumer credit scheme. National Security Advisor, service chiefs, northern governors meet over kidnapping. Ningi's constituents give up a 2-week ultimatum to reverse suspension of Bauchi senator. That's a wrap on the World News at 12. My name is Esther Nwachukwu. Good afternoon and thank you.